The rain fell hard on the metal streets of Earth's border zone, cold and endless. Washing away the dust and silence, Yalun, a young human man, walked quickly through the checkpoint tunnel. Trying to get home before curfew, he wore a thick coat and carried a small bag of groceries, his boots splashing in shallow puddles. The city lights flickered above him, but the checkpoint door ahead stood heavy and still. Guarded by scanning drones, behind him, the sound of quiet feet made him glance. Back, she was standing there, small and strange. Her skin pale violet under the rain, with long white hair stuck to her cheeks. An alien girl, alone, soaking wet, no coat, no bag. Nothing but a broken necklace clutched in her fist. She didn't speak, didn't cry. She only stared at the door and then at Yalun. Others walked past her without care. Some even pushed her aside, but she stayed quiet, her eyes following Yalun. Yalun hesitated. Hand on the checkpoint panel, he looked at her again, then sighed and stepped back. Holding the door open, the alien girl blinked, unsure, then slowly walked forward, crossing the threshold. Her eyes never leaving his, she nodded once. Just a small motion, then disappeared into the crowd inside. Yalun didn't think much of it. He just shrugged and kept walking home. That night, he sat in his small apartment, cooking dinner, watching the news, and forgetting the moment. The world was full of aliens now. Ever since the peace treaty after the border war, thousands of species, thousands of stories, and most humans just kept their heads down. But something about her eyes had stayed with him, something silent, strange, maybe even sad. At midnight, loud knocks hit his door. 3 security officers stood outside, one holding a scanner. "We're searching for a female alien refugee." One said, "Seen anyone suspicious today?" Yalun shook his head, heart racing. "No, just went through checkpoint. Didn't stop for anyone." They scanned the room, didn't enter, then left without a word. He stood at the door for a moment, breathing hard, wondering why he had lied. He couldn't sleep, turning in his bed, replaying the moment over and over. Why did they want her so badly? Was she dangerous? Or was she in danger? At 3 a.m., he heard a soft knock on the window. He lived on the 2nd floor, so it made no sense. Cautiously, he pulled the curtain and jumped back. She was there. The alien girl crouched on the narrow ledge, wet, shivering, eyes glowing faintly in the night. She held up the broken necklace, then placed it gently on the glass. He opened the window, confused. "What are you doing here?" She climbed inside, silent, water dripping onto the floor. She didn't ask, didn't beg. She just looked around the room, then sat near the heater like she had always lived there. Yalun stood frozen. You can't just. This is illegal." She looked up, finally speaking, her voice soft and careful. "You opened the door." He nodded slowly, unsure what to say. "You claimed me," she added. "Now I must give you children." Yalun dropped his cup, shocked. "What?" No, I didn't mean it was just kindness, that's all." But she tilted her head. "In my culture, if a male opens the passage for a fertile female, it means he accepts her fully." Yalun backed away. "Listen, I don't know your culture. I was just being polite." She smiled gently. "That is rare. That is why I chose you." He didn't know what to do. Didn't know what rules applied. Here, was this some kind of misunderstanding? Or was this girl really bound by something far older, something sacred to her kind? She stood up slowly and placed the necklace in his hand. "It is broken," she said, "but I saved it. For you." He looked at the crystal piece, glowing faintly in his palm. Her eyes were calm, but behind them was a storm of fear, hope, and desperation. "I don't want to cause trouble," he said, softly, "but I can't just take you in." "Like this," she nodded. "Then I will leave at dawn if you wish, but I will not run again." Yalun didn't answer. He only walked to the heater and placed a blanket around her shoulders. He sat across the room, watching her slowly close her eyes and rest, curled like a child outside. The city drones flew by, scanning the streets, searching for someone, but inside, a strange peace settled over the room. A door had opened, and Yolan didn't yet know his life had changed forever. Asterisk when Yolan opened his eyes, it was already morning. Sunlight peeked through the metal blinds, lighting up the small apartment in a soft glow. He sat up, stretched, and turned to the corner near the heater, expecting it to be empty, but she was still there, curled up under the blanket he gave her, breathing softly like she had never been scared of anything. He stared for a moment, unsure if the night before had been a dream. It wasn't. He made coffee, quietly, the smell filling the room. She stirred, then opened her silver eyes, blinking at the ceiling. "Is it dawn?" she asked, voice soft and sleepy. Yolan nodded. "Yeah. You said you'd leave." She sat up slowly, pulling the blanket around her. "I will, if you wish it," but there was something in her voice, like she didn't want to go, like she had nowhere else to be. Yolan looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. "You're not safe out there, are you?" She didn't answer, just lowered her eyes. An hour passed, then 2, and she still hadn't left. Instead, she stood up and walked around the apartment slowly, touching books, looking at photos, learning. Yolan watched her, unsure what to say. Unsure how to stop her, she moved like the room already belonged to her, like it was home then. Without asking, she opened a drawer, pulled out one of his clean shirts, and went into the bathroom. Yolan blinked. "Hey, you can't just..." But she had already closed the door when she came out. She wore his black t-shirt like a dress, her long white hair combed back with her fingers. Oh. She looked at him and smiled gently. "This smells like you." Yolan shook his head. "You're acting like we're married or something." She tilted her head. "We are not." He stared at her, speechless, then covered his face with his hands. "This can't be happening." She began cleaning the table, then picked up the dishes and washed them carefully in the sink. Her movements were graceful, careful, almost like she was used to being judged. Yolan leaned against the wall, watching her. "Why are you doing this?" She looked back at him, because this is what a claimed female does. He rubbed his forehead, trying to make sense of it. "Claimed? I didn't claim you. You did." She replied calmly. "You opened the door." He laughed bitterly. "That's all it takes." "In my culture, yes," she said, "but not just the act. It is the intent." And yours was pure. Yolan didn't know how to argue that, because deep down, he had just wanted to be kind. Not heroic, not romantic, just kind. And now here she was, in his home, calling him her bondmate. She made him tea, then sat across from him at the small table, legs folded, hands in her lap. "My name is Lyra," she said finally. "I come from the star system called Valise, but I ran away from the breeding towers." Yolan froze. "Breeding towers?" Lyra nodded slowly. "My kind is dying. We cannot grow new life without willing human essence." He nearly choked on his tea. "So? They're forcing your people to..." "Yes," she interrupted gently, "and I refused. Because I want to choose who fathers my children." Yolan stared at her, heart pounding. "And you chose me," he whispered. She nodded. "Because you did not see me as a tool. You did not fear me, or touch me, or stare at me like a thing." She leaned forward, her voice shaking slightly. "You held a door for me." He couldn't speak, only looked away, the silence heavy between them. She reached into her small pouch and pulled out a folded hologram image of her people. Once proud, now locked away in metal rooms, waiting to be assigned to strangers. "I would rather die," she said, "than be used by them." Yolan felt something shift inside him in anger he didn't expect. a need to protect this strange girl who now wore his shirt-like armor. He stood up, paced the room, then turned to her. "You can stay here for now." Her eyes lit up, soft and shining. "I will not be a burden." He pointed at the couch. "That's your spot, not my bed, okay?" She smiled gently. "As you wish." The rest of the day passed in quiet movements. Like two strangers learning each other's rhythms, Lyra never asked for anything but helped with everything at night. She lay down on the couch, curling up with the blanket again, but before closing her eyes, she whispered, "Thank you, Yalin, for letting me exist." He sat by the window, staring at the stars, wondering what he had just allowed into his life. An alien girl who followed ancient rules, who smiled softly but carried deep pain. And deep in his chest, he felt a warning. This was no ordinary kindness. This was the beginning of something that would change him forever. The days passed quietly, but Yalin knew something was coming. He could feel it in the way the air around the city grew tense. Posters appeared on screens near the checkpoints, written in 3 languages, including one he didn't recognize. Each displayed a glowing outline of an alien female, with the words "Runaway Reproductive Asset Reward." If found, he stared at the screen longer than he should have. And when he turned around, Lyra was already watching him from the window. "I should leave," she said softly. "They're getting close." Yolan shook his head. "You leave now. They'll catch you in minutes." Lyra didn't argue. She only pulled the curtain tighter and sat back on the floor. He noticed her skin looked paler than before. And she was wearing 2 layers of clothes just to stay warm. "You're not built for this climate, are you?" he asked. She gave a small smile. "Not for your cold air. No, my kind needs warmth. And presence." "Presence?" he asked, confused. She looked down. "Your nearness?" Yalin didn't respond. He just walked to the heater and turned it up. He didn't understand everything she said, but he understood enough to know she was getting weaker, and not just from the weather. The next morning, as he stepped outside for groceries, a patrol drone hovered lower than usual. It scanned his face, then his ID, and lingered a little too long. "Citizen," the machine buzzed. "Have you encountered any unregistered Velicians lately?" Yalin swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "No, I mostly stay inside." The drone hovered for a moment more, then zipped off with a sharp whistle. Yalin walked away, hands cold, heart pounding. When he returned home, he found the apartment spotless. Everything cleaned, food made, and Lyra sitting quietly at the corner of the couch. "I heard the drone," she said without looking at him. "I lied," he replied, sitting across from her. She nodded once, then whispered, "Thank you." That night, the city lights dimmed, a power-saving measure before a scheduled sweep. From the balcony, Yelan saw armored transport units rolling slowly through the streets, scanning every window, every door. "Lyra, we need to move you," he said, locking the door. "To where?" She asked calmly. "The old basement." He said, "No scans work down there." They moved quickly. Yalin carrying a blanket, Lyra wrapping herself in a coat 3 times her size. They slipped into the shadows behind the apartment building, and down a rusted stairwell into the underground level. The air was cold and smelled of old metal, but it was safe, for now, in the corner of the basement. Behind storage crates, Yalin built a small nest of blankets and sat beside her. He could hear the muffled sounds of patrols above, boots and engines echoing faintly through the pipes. Lyra leaned her head on his shoulder, trembling slightly. "You're shaking," he said. "I told you," she whispered. "I need your presence." He wrapped his arm around her, uncertain, but unable to say no. Her skin was cold and her breathing slow. Yalin didn't understand alien biology, but he understood she was fading. "Tell me what I can do," he said, voice low. She hesitated, then placed his hand over her heart. "Stay near. Speak to me." even if it's just words. So he talked about his childhood, his work, how he once wanted to travel the stars but never left the ground. She listened quietly, eyes half closed, fingers gently holding the hem of his sleeve. And slowly her skin warmed again. Above, the sound of footsteps grew louder, heavier. The building was being searched, floor by floor. Yolan stood, alert, heart racing. "We may have to run," he whispered, but Lyra pulled his sleeve. "They won't find us here unless someone speaks." Her eyes met his. "Have you told anyone about me?" He shook his head. "Not a soul." Minutes passed like hours. Every creak of the walls a threat, then silence, long and heavy. The patrol had moved on. Yolan exhaled. Falling back against the wall, Lyra placed her head in his lap, exhausted. "You protected me again," she said, eyes closed, even when it was dangerous. "I didn't do anything special," he said. She smiled softly. "To my kind, it means everything." Yolan looked down at her. This girl who had come from stars and chains, now curled up like a wounded bird. He didn't know what he felt. Not yet. But he knew he couldn't let her be taken. When they returned to the apartment, everything had been touched. Drawers open, blankets moved. They searched. Lyra said quietly. "Yeah," Yolan replied, locking the door behind them. "And they'll come again." He looked around, thinking fast, then turned to her. "We need a better plan, Lyra. This hiding won't last." She nodded, her voice faint. "Then I must prepare the bond, before they take me again." "What bond?" he asked. She walked over to her bag, pulling out a small, glowing crystal. The same one he had seen her with the first night. "If you accept me fully," she whispered, "they can no longer separate us. No matter what species we are." Yolan stared at the crystal, heartbeat loud in his ears. "Lyra, are you asking me to become yours?" She looked up, hopeful and afraid. "No, I am asking if you will let me become yours." The crystal in Lyra's hand glowed faint blue, pulsing like a heartbeat. Yolan stared at it, unsure, his mind racing, with thoughts he couldn't explain. He wasn't a soldier, not a hero, not someone who chased adventure or romance. He was just a man who held a door open, and somehow that one small act had brought this alien girl into his life. Now she stood before him, offering not just trust, but a bond that could change everything. "What does it mean?" he asked quietly. Lyra stepped closer, careful, respectful, her voice gentle. "A soft bond. Nothing forced, no child. Just a link between our minds and hearts." Yolan blinked. "You can do that?" She nodded. "Only with permission, and only with someone whose soul allows it." He hesitated, thinking of the patrols, the scans, the way the world had turned colder since she entered his apartment. And yet, it didn't feel wrong. It felt like something real, something rare. He nodded slowly. "Okay. What do I have to do?" Lyra's eyes softened, and she knelt down. Placing the crystal on the ground between them, she pressed her palm to it, and it lit up brighter, casting soft light over the walls. Then she looked up at him. "You must speak your truth, and touch." The crystal. Yolan knelt across from her, his hand hovering over the light. "What truth?" he asked. She closed her eyes. "Why did you open the door?" Yolan breathed in slowly, his fingers trembling. "I saw someone alone. I didn't want her to feel that way." As soon as he spoke the words, the crystal warmed beneath his hand. Lyra opened her eyes, and a faint shimmer passed between them. Like air bending in heat, images flashed in Jalen's mind, quick and bright. Lyra as a child, held behind glass walls, always quiet, always watched, older, escaping with only the clothes on her back and that broken necklace. The way she looked at the stars like they were promises she couldn't reach. Then she saw him, standing by a door. Not knowing what that simple act would mean, Yolan gasped. Softly, pulling back, "I saw your memories." She nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. The bond has begun. He didn't understand how it worked. Only that something inside him now felt closer to her. Not romantic, not yet, but real. Like she had opened her heart and let him step inside. Suddenly, the crystal let out a sharp flicker. Then dimmed. Lyra frowned. Someone as near Yalin stood quickly, walking to the window. A black hovercraft sat on the far end of the alley. Not moving, but watching. "Scouts," he whispered. "They found me," she said, voice steady. "But the bond isn't complete yet." Yalin turned to her. "What do we do?" Lyra stood, her frame glowing faintly with the bond's energy. "If we complete it fully, they can't take me by force." He stared at her, heartbeat loud in his chest. "And that means what?" She stepped closer, her hand touching his. "You must allow me into your soul." All the way, Yalin searched her face for fear, but there was none. Only trust and something deep and ancient. He nodded once, firmly, "Then do it." Lyra stepped back, lifted the crystal, and placed it between them. She whispered words in her native tongue, her voice like wind through stars. Then she pressed her forehead to his, in an instant. Yalin saw everything: her loneliness, her strength, her dreams, and her pain. He saw himself through her eyes, the warmth in his smile, the way she had felt safe for the first time. Tears rolled down his cheeks, and he didn't know why. When it ended, she fell back into his arms, weak but smiling. "It is done," she whispered. "We are one soul now." He held her tightly, more protective than ever. Outside, the hovercraft powered up and flew away. As if sensing she was no longer theirs to take, the bond had marked her, marked him, sealed something greater than any contract or law. That night, Lyra slept peacefully in his bed. And Yalin sat beside her, awake, thoughtful. His apartment felt different now, not just a place he lived in. It was a sanctuary, a space where something impossible had happened. He looked at the glowing crystal resting on the table, now still, now quiet. The war hadn't ended. The danger hadn't passed, but they were no longer two. Somewhere out in the galaxy, forces were moving, preparing to take her back. But now, she wasn't just a fugitive, she was bonded. And Yalin was no longer just a man who held a door open. He was now the key. The morning after the bond ceremony, the sky outside Jalen's window looked too quiet. Clouds didn't move, the wind didn't blow, and the air felt heavy, like something was waiting to fall. Lyra stood near the window, wrapped in a blanket, her silver eyes staring far into the sky. "They know," she whispered. "They felt the bond." Yul stepped beside her. "They can't break it now, right?" She nodded slowly. "No one can break it. But they will still try." Yalin tightened his jaw. Let them come. An hour later, the apartment door beeped with a strange red light. It wasn't the normal buzz of a neighbor or a delivery. It was the signal used only by off-world enforcers. Lyra froze, her body trembling just slightly. Yalin moved quickly, grabbing her hand and pulling her toward the secret hatch in the Floran old maintenance shaft he had sealed up years ago. "Go," he whispered. "Don't say anything, just stay hidden." She touched his chest once, gently, then climbed down into the dark shaft without a word. Yalin closed the hatch just as the door burst open. 3 armored figures entered, faces hidden behind black visors, voices sharp and cold. "Where is the Velician female?" The lead one asked, stepping forward. Yalin raised his hands, keeping calm. "There's no one here but me." They searched everything, tearing apart drawers, throwing books, lifting furniture. One of them scanned the air with a red sensor. Frowning, bond energy detected. Yalin didn't flinch. "I don't know what that means." The lead officer turned to him. "You're lying, human. I live alone." Kalon replied, voice steady. "Check the records." They stared. At him for a long time, their weapons still drawn. Then one of them tapped his helmet and said, "We're not authorized to harm a bonded human." Not yet. They left with heavy boots and angry silence. Yulin locked the door behind them and waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. And finally, the hatch opened slowly. Lyra climbed out, her hair messy, her eyes wide. "They will come back," she said. With permission, Yulin walked to her and cupped her face. "Then we leave first." They packed only what they needed, a small bag of clothes, water, the crystal, and Lyra's necklace. They moved at night. Through back alleys and broken train tunnels, staying out of sight. Every checkpoint was dangerous. Every shadow could be a spy, but Yulin knew the city better than most, and Lyra could sense danger before it came close. After 3 days of running, they reached the outer scrapyards, a wasteland of old metal and rusted ships. Hidden beneath one of the towers was an old smuggler's ship one Yulin used to repair during his part-time job. "It still flies," he said, smiling for the first time in days. Lyra touched the cold hull. "Will it take us far?" "As far as we need to go," he said. "Anywhere they won't find us." But before they could take off, the air shimmered, and a pulse cannon blast hit the ground nearby. The enforcers had followed them, and now they weren't holding back. Yulin grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her inside the ship, closing the hatch just as another blast shook the dirt. "They're shooting at us now," he growled, rushing to the controls. "They don't care anymore." Lyra said softly, "They know the bond is real. They want to erase it." The engines roared to life, coughing dust and smoke. Yulin pushed the throttle, and the ship lifted off just as a third blast missed the wing by inches. They shot into the sky, climbing fast, the city shrinking below them, but the danger wasn't gone. A sleek black fighter followed close behind, aiming to disable the ship before it left orbit. Yulin cursed under his breath, trying to dodge, but the smuggler ship was old and heavy. "We won't outrun them," he said. "Not like this." Lyra stepped beside him, placed the glowing crystal into the ship's core. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Trust me," she whispered. The ship shuddered. Lights flickered. Then a new surge of power flowed through the system. The engines glowed blue, brighter than they had in years. Yulin stared at the dashboard, amazed. "That's not possible." Lyra smiled faintly. "It's bonded now." To us, with a roar, the ship shot forward. Leaving the black fighter behind in a blink, they crossed the upper atmosphere, stars opening before them like a quiet sea. And finally, silence returned. Yulin leaned back, breathing hard, hands shaking. Lyra sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. "They'll chase us," he said. She nodded. "But they'll never catch us." Yulin looked at the stars, then at her. He hadn't asked for this, hadn't planned for any of it, but now that she was beside him, now that their fates were tied, he knew there was no going back. The stars stretched wide across the black sky, endless and silent. Yulin had never seen them this way before, not from behind city glass, but from deep space. He sat in the pilot's seat, watching as the stars moved slowly past the window. Lyra sat beside him, quiet and calm, her hand resting near his, close enough to feel the warmth. "We're far now," he said. "Do you think they'll still follow?" She nodded once, her voice soft. "Not follow. Hunt." The bonded crystal powered the ship's core, stronger than any fuel Yulin had ever used. It hummed quietly, alive with energy that pulsed in time with Lyra's breath. She's connected to it, he realized. It's like the ship listens to her. Lyra nodded. It responds to the bond. Because it is part of me now. They drifted for hours, crossing sectors without stopping, passing silent moons and empty asteroid belts. But Lyra's eyes always looked ahead, not at the stars, but at something far beyond. "Where are we going?" Alon asked finally. She answered slowly. "Home." Or what's left of it, her home planet, once called Valhera, was now a forgotten world. Blocked from official maps, the galaxy had declared it off-limits, forbidden to enter. Why? Yalin wondered aloud. Because they don't want anyone to see what they did, Lyra whispered. As they neared the system, the stars seemed darker, the space colder. Yolin looked at the readings, and his stomach tightened. There's almost no life on the surface, he said. Confused, Lyra placed her hand on the console. And the screen changed, showing images not captured by scanners. Small camps hidden under mountains, towers buried in snow, and shadows moving in silence. They hide the survivors, she said. The rest were taken. The ship landed in a quiet valley, surrounded by sharp black rocks and low red clouds. It didn't feel like a home, it felt like a grave. Yolin stepped out first, his boots sinking into soft ash. Lyra followed slowly, her eyes heavy, her breath deep. It was green here once, she said. Fields of gold and rivers of light. Now, only dust remained and echoes of what used to be. They walked toward a broken tower, half buried in earth. It leaned like a tree cut from its roots, rusted and cracked. This was the nursery, Lyra said, touching the wall where girls like me were raised. Yalin looked around, his heart aching. Why did they abandon it? Because we began to think, she answered, and dreaming made us dangerous. Inside the tower, the walls were lined with empty beds, names scratched into the metal. Yalin ran his fingers over one, reading the carved letters. Lyra, he said, surprised. She smiled faintly. That was mine. I never expected to see it again. As they explored deeper, they heard movement, soft steps, cautious breaths from the shadows. Figures emerged, young women with pale skin and glowing eyes, all watching Lyra with wonder. They didn't speak. Not at first, but their eyes said everything. One of them stepped forward and whispered, "You bonded." Lyra nodded, and they all gasped, touching her, embracing her. "You survived." Another said, "You found someone who chose you." Yolin stood still, overwhelmed, watching as these forgotten souls gathered around Lyra like she was light. In the dark, "I didn't know there were others," he whispered. "There are hundreds," she replied, "but they hide, waiting, hoping." They led Yalin and Lyra to an old chamber underground, filled with warm light and glowing machines. Here, the hidden ones had made a new life, one without walls or chains, but it was fragile. Always at risk, always hunted, and now that Lyra had returned, everything changed. "We must decide," said the elder girl. "Will we keep running, or rise?" Yolin looked at Lyra. "What does she mean?" "She means," Lyra said gently, "if I stay, and you stay, we become a symbol, a bonded pair, a human and a Valesian. Chosen by heart, not by law. Together, they could speak for the forgotten, demand peace, demand change, but it would mean facing the full force of those who wanted them erased." Lyra turned to Yolin, her voice trembling. "If we do this, they won't stop. They will come again, stronger." Yalin stepped closer, his voice steady. "Then let them come." He reached for her hand, holding it firmly. "I opened a door once. Now I'll open the galaxy if I have to." Her eyes filled with tears, and she pressed her forehead to his. "You are no longer just kind," she whispered. "You are mine," and he whispered back. "You are not alone anymore." 2 years passed, quietly, and then loudly. The galaxy, once cold to the cries of Lyra's people, now watched with cautious curiosity. News spread like sparks in dry wind. A bonded pair had emerged from the forgotten ruins of Valhera. A human man, Yalin, and an alien woman, Lyra, had created something that no law could erase. Hope, their ship, now known as the Bound Flame, had become a symbol of peace and defiance. They didn't fight with guns, not yet. They fought with presence, with proof, with love. And that was harder to destroy. Yalin walked through the settlement they had helped build, Once a scrapyard, now a blooming colony. Tents had become homes. Homes had become classrooms. Clinics and safe spaces. Children played in the dust. Laughter ringing under a red sky, not just alien children, but hybrids. Human and Velician children, born of choice, not programming, not pressure. Lyra stood under a tree that had been grown from ancient Velician seeds. Her hands resting on her growing belly. Her second child moved gently within her. Her first, a girl named Nira, chased insects in the grass nearby. Her hair silver like Lyra's, her eyes brown like Jalen's. Yalin, Lyra called softly. And he turned with a smile. He walked to her, placing a kiss on her forehead. She kicked again. Lyra whispered, smiling. That means she's strong, Yalin replied, touching her stomach gently. They sat together on a bench made from old ship panels, watching their daughter run. She'll never know the towers, Lyra said. Her voice filled with peace. No. Yalin replied, she know freedom, but peace had its price, and they knew it from the stars above. Eyes still watched. The Empire hadn't forgotten. They had just grown quiet, waiting, and now. They stirred again. One evening, a message came through the long-range comms, encrypted, urgent. A nearby station had been raided, and young Velician. Girls were missing. Lyra's eyes burned, and Jalen's hands clenched into fists. They're starting again, she said. Then we end it, he answered. The council of the colony gathered that night. Their faces lit by firelight and resolve. We cannot fight them head-on, one elder said. No, Lyra replied, but we can stand tall. She looked at Yalan, who stood and spoke to the group. We don't need warships, we just need truth. They sent a signal to the galaxy. Not a threat, not a warning, but a story. A recording of Lyra's life, her escape, her bond. Her children and people watched. Millions of them, some wept, some turned away, but many stood up. The spark became a fire. Allies came, not armies, but doctors, builders, translators, even journalists. The hidden became seen, and those who once ruled in shadows began to fear. The light, the Empire tried to silence the signal, but the story had already spread too far. They sent ships, small at first, to scare, to test. But the bound flame rose into orbit, its hull glowing with the bond's energy. Yalin and Lyra stood at its helm. Together, they did not fire weapons. They opened comms. Jalen's voice reached. Every corner of the approaching fleet, you have taken enough, broken enough, buried enough truth. This is not your system anymore, Lyra added. It belongs to the children now. The fleet paused, unsure. Then one ship turned, and another followed, the rest. Vanished into hyperspace, not out of fear, but because they knew the old way was ending. Lyra sat in the medbay later that night, holding her newborn son. His skin shimmered softly in the light. His heartbeat strong. Yolan stood nearby, holding Nira in his arms, their family complete. Do you ever think about that day? Lyra asked. The door? Yalan replied, smiling. She nodded. If you hadn't held it open, I would have missed everything that matters. He said. Nira rested her head on his shoulder. Sleepy, the baby yawned in Lyra's arms, warm and safe. And for the first time in a long time, there was no fear, no patrols, no scanners, no soldiers breaking down doors. Just a family. One that had started with a single act of kindness, a hand holding open a door, and a voice that said, "Come in. You're safe." And in the quiet hum of the ship, surrounded by stars, that kindness echoed still.